We've got Joe from Hats Off Entertainment. He's right there. We got him.
It's my first ever video interview, so you guys have scored the exclusive.
Do you have any like sub channels or anything where you've ever done anything on camera at all?
No. We have a podcast that I run as well. It's a spin-off of some of our videos, but yeah, no, this is the first visual thing I've ever done.
I gotta tell you, like we teased, like, hey, we might have Joe from Hats Off come on. I got a ton of comments.
Oh, that's
like,
great.
I love Hats Off. Like, oh my God, you're gonna get him. Or there because you and I have been chatting for, like a year or so off and on. And occasionally like somebody would say like, do you guys watch Hats Off Entertainment? Do you ever watch, like, he's got really great retrospectives. And I think that the first video I ever got recommended of yours on YouTube, and really the truth is, man, like if you know this better than we do, if you're a film fan, YouTube's probably recommending your channel.
At some point, yeah, one of the videos at some point's probably popped up.
For me, it was the lost version of Home Alone 2. It got like right into my feed, probably around Christmas time. I wonder if you pick up a lot of new holiday subscribers.
Holidays a big, that's why I try to do the holiday themed videos, because it always seems to pick up a little bit. Anything themed around something big coming out or something. Like I just did a video on this weird 1981 movie about the making of The Wizard of Oz called Under the Rainbow. And I guess with like all the Wicked hype, maybe something it just hit differently than the others in that series. So you never know.
Even just the branding is so good, like lost version. Like, and basically you are just talking about deleted scenes and deleted or stuff in the script that wasn't filmed, but that's such good branding. It's like it catches your eye and you're like, ooh, what is the lost version?
You see so many, it's not me that does it, but like 10 things you didn't know about this movie. So it's all about kind of generating curiosity, I've found, but also not being like clickbaity in a way.
That's what we learned. We did this big Mr. Beast deep dive where we're like, I think that's a man who tests the limits of clickbait. It was one of the things that occurred to me while I was going through all your videos, because of course you have many different kind of like sub themes of your channel, like lost version, it's not that bad, the mini documentaries, of course. What am I forgetting?
Almost cult classics. I've never kind of planned out series. It's all just been about I've discovered movies I want to talk about and be like, have they fit into this? Have they fit into that? I mean, I have comments all the time, people being like, wait, is this a forgotten failure or an almost cult classic? What's the difference? I'm like, I don't know anymore.
I can relate to that. Most of our videos on the other channel are just me following around my friend John with the camera and deciding what the show is. They're like, is this a Pewter Smith or is this a John's cart?
Well, that's why I was happy to do this interview with you guys, because as we're talking, I found your work mainly through your great retrospectives on some of the creators that I grew up watching that were really important to me. And from that, I kind of discovered your other work. What I told Frankie when we first connected was that I love, and I'll advise any of my subscribers to check out your work, because it feels like the type of content my friends and I did in high school and that we'd still be doing had we all stayed in touch and active in filmmaking. Your content reminds me so much of just a bunch of friends having a great time and making entertainment in the process.
I mean, I feel so lucky. Like, it's kind of interesting because, at least in the case of John, of course, my wife, Nina, who I met in high school, like our friend Zach, who often does Boom. Like, these are people I've known for decades, and who I assume, maybe not in the case of John, but like, I did when I went to film school, I sort of assumed that maybe like we would stop. And for a little while we did, I went off with other collaborators, but then, it was like through YouTube, actually. It was like, hey, on the weekends, before I had a child, like, let's make this mac and cheese show, or let's do this shopping thing. Or it was kind of like really purely just for fun in our late 20s when, some of our responsibilities had subsided briefly. I met EJ in the MFA program, in our master's program at Emerson. So now I've known EJ since like 2011, 2012. So like, he's like a, super long time friend as well. It's not to say that I haven't, like, I've lost collaborators along the way. Like, I've definitely, I've had projects where somebody's like, all right, that's the last one for me. But I always feel kind of melancholy when that happens. I'm always like, isn't there a way we could squeak out another, I don't know if I've ever told him this, but like probably for the first like 3-4 years, I was like, I wonder like if EJ will just, be done with this shit after a while.
Nope. Ride or die, baby.
I'm sick of this shit, okay?
The truth is, I don't encounter a whole lot of what I would consider to be like genuine or authentic, like friendships or familial relationships on YouTube. And I know that authenticity is this thing that everybody's always trying to like drum up or generate. A lot of the style choices you see in YouTube videos, like interacting with the cameraman or this sort of thing, like it's trying to generate that authenticity.
You hear this phrase a lot, at least I've heard it, friend simulator. I think that's why channels like Red Letter Media are so successful, and why people like your podcast and content, because they just kind of become a fly on the wall with friends hanging out. And it's great because it represents just, yeah, I think what that time in our lives when we just kind of hung out with friends and talked about movies. And I think so much of the YouTube film community is that.
Yeah. You can tell if two people like each other or not.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
If they enjoy, like EJ started the podcast. He said, we don't do anything for the patrons. Why don't we just like do, I don't know, like he pitched it as like a 10-minute phone call is what he said. But you can't, I'm not shutting up after 10 minutes.
When did you like start putting the podcast clips on YouTube?
It would have been right around the time we put up that big James Rolfe one. So August 2021 is when. And we started the podcast January 2020 because it was right before COVID.
Yeah, but it's been so amazing as someone that's watched your content to see you guys grow and develop and kind of put more effort into the podcast clips and the stuff you've done. It's been really cool to see that began as these two guys hanging out, just catching up to like these really great in-depth discussions on a lot of content creators, like I said, that I grew up that were huge to me. And that kind of paved the way, I think, for a lot of us that get on the internet and talk about movies.
Through your channel, have you ever because I think one of the coolest things about YouTube is it's an opportunity to like express yourself, in whatever way you deem, suitable, in whatever way, best represents you. And then sometimes people say like, what's your goal with this whole thing? And after decades, basically, I'm like, well, I guess my goal is to express myself authentically and then connect with somebody who's like-minded enough that wants to connect back. Like, that's really kind of what it's about. And through that, like on occasion, like there have been like online friendships. So we have these editors who like probably some of them will be lifelong friends. Has that ever happened through Hats Off? Have you ever is there any kind of community that you cultivate or like friends that you've made along the way?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's funny, especially when I shouldn't say funny, but like when all this tragic stuff's happening in Los Angeles and, maybe like 5 years ago, I didn't know many LA people. And now it's like all of a sudden I'm like, oh wait, like through Hats Off and through the connections I made, I know people that live out there in the industry. And just in terms of just the amount of really good connections I made and just people who, have seen my work that have reached out via email, people that have worked on some of the movies that I've talked about, that's always been, and they always come through various sources. I mean, like I'm pretty approachable in terms of social media and things like that, but I always I'll get like messages to my personal Facebook account or like Instagram DMs that I don't see for like months because they get hidden in folders. So it's just interesting how certain people reach out. But yeah, I mean, I've talked to some of the crew members of films that I've discussed. So it's been a real thrill to do that. And I'm hopeful that maybe in the future I'll start doing more maybe interview pieces and try to get some of these people on mic.
I think it makes a lot of sense. Like the thing, I think, because you run the risk with a channel that's movie retrospectives and movie analysis, you run the risk of just being another one, right? It's a well-worn, as we are with podcasts, two guys make each other laugh.
They talk and they joke. Sometimes they're funny.
You gotta do some funny voices and impressions.
Yes, yeah. The history of Power Rangers has no set schedule.
Well, you know what you guys do that's great? I think my podcast, we currently don't have this. You need someone that just laughs. And you guys have that because you both laugh at each other. Oh, yeah. And it's like when you have that little reassurance that, hey, this person's funny.
Yeah, it like keeps the thing alive a little bit.
It's why I used to love those old Ricky Gervais podcasts with Carl Pilkington, and because Ricky was just such a great at laughing and reacting.
I thought about the Big Bang and wondered if it was really a Big Bang or did it just sound louder as there was no other noise to drown it out.
Good point, isn't it? Rich Evans on Red Letter Media. You have those people that just kind of really laugh. It heightens the material and makes it enjoyable.
Really, that's one of the reasons why I started the podcast is I just like listening to Frankie's. I can pencil it in every other week.
I love it. And people have like, whenever anybody says that EJ is fake laughing, like I can take a lot of shit from the comments. I don't want to hear that EJ's fake laughing because I'm like, EJ's laugh is one of my favorite sounds on the planet. Okay. Yeah. Like it's like, that's my friend connecting with me. Like, fuck you, fake laughing.
That being said, you guys, when you first started this, again, if some of my subscribers are watching this and are unfamiliar, your setup looked very different visually. EJ was in a basement with shelving and you were in short shorts.
It was literally for patrons. So we were like on webcams in the famous James Rolfe one. I like just took a shower, so my hair's all like messed up.
Did that like comments and I shouldn't even say criticism, but did it motivate you guys to kind of?
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it was horrible in a way because you spend literal decades making movies refining your craft. EJ in many ways is a technician. I'm kind of a technician as well. Like, we know how to make a camera look good.
Yeah.
We do this, we our main channel, like even the dinkiest of content is highly edited. This is the one fucking time that we were like, let's just throw up a Zoom and we'll chat about James Rolfe and we'll throw it up on Patreon. Maybe we'll throw it up as a clip. Who knows? And wouldn't you know it, the whole conversation is about how inept and incompetent the other guy is at his technology. And we're sitting there with our balls hanging out and our shelves unpainted.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm not one to take it lightly when thousands of comments are like, "What would you know about filmmaking?" So quickly we both got like ring lights. We got the G9. We got the Shure SM whatever it is, SM7. It was actually really awesome. It was like, because we were still kind of making a transition away from. I think as our kids got older, I think we kind of knew that like the days of like meeting up once a month and shooting tons of live content and editing it was becoming impractical. And so being able to make like more deluxe content right here in our houses was kind of attractive. That was sort of what like the podcast was.
Yeah,
starting
consistent content. We didn't know we were even setting ourselves up to do this.
Right.
We just did it out of necessity because people saw that. Because we used to post Boxmac like every Sunday. Every Sunday we used to post.
I told Frankie when we connected first, I was like, last year I had the flu, and one of the only things I could keep down was the microwavable Easy Mac cups. And just to make it like more edible, I would watch you guys review shitty mac and cheese because it somehow made the experience better.
That's awesome.
Me trying to picture, I'm actually eating this Cabot, deluxe mac here.
It's like just fantasizing about something much sexier.
That stuff with like the gross powder that's already in with the noodle.
God.
It's like, ugh.
It breaks the bubbles or enzymes or something.
I've learned all this from watching Boxmac, so it's been a great. But it's funny too because when I first started Hats Off, like I'm in Philadelphia. As you know from talking about Mr. James Rolfe, we sometimes say things not quite the proper way.
A word that I cannot avoid using is review. I've always said review till everybody tells me it's review. It's bury, but everyone else says bury.
I found very early on in my channel, it kind of became like speech therapy because I would get these comments of like, I remember the first one that I really like noticed I was getting shit for was I did a video on the Addams Family Reunion, which was like the third Addams Family live action movie. I think it was like ABC Family did it. It was very cheap.
Tim Curry as Gomez.
Thank you. And in pronouncing his name, I just vowels have always been a little challenging. So I started seeing comments that were like, ha ha ha, Tim Curry, pet detective. And I'm like, I don't get it. What did I say? And then like, why does this guy say Curry so funny? Like I was basically
How are you saying it? I don't know.
Like it would rhyme with like Merry Christmas. Like
when James Rolfe says bury.
Bury, yeah.
I rest my case.
But you did the opposite. You said instead of Curry, you said Kerry.
To be fair, Tim Curry's casting in this film is one of the bold moves that actually works.
So just like little moments like that, I really had to retrain my brain how to say things. And it's been, again, you don't want to necessarily react to criticism that strongly, but there is certain waves of it that are valid.
You know what's interesting about that is, especially in the last week, I've been mainlining Hats Off Entertainment. And by the way, like in all sincerity, like what a privilege. A lot of times we have to do kind of research for our podcast, but I'm like, it's almost fucking frustrating watching your content because I'm like, I should watch that movie again. Somehow I've never seen Wagons East, or going through. I'm like, I should watch. It's my wife and I are going to have a full slate.
Your videos they're just like the perfect YouTube. It's like not like overproduced. It's not underproduced. It's like just right, I think. And it's got the sincerity to it because you obviously love what you're talking about. You know how like Zoomer slop is so like long and flabby? This is like my perfect tight millennial slop.
It took a while to get there. When I first started, and this is, I got very lucky. I think my first YouTube account was in 2006. So I've been uploading, and trust me, that was just stuff like me and my friends when we were like 14 were making. But I've been involved in YouTube for most of my life at this point, honestly. I mean, it's been growing up with it there and always having it there.
You're what, early 30s, so you would have been like high school when YouTube debuted? Is that the idea?
I think I was even like in late elementary school.
Oh, okay.
I always found what Hats Off was, again, when I first started, my videos weren't huge, but it seemed like the more niche I went, the more conversation was being driven around the topic. So it kind of motivated me to get really niche with my topics. Whereas in the beginning, I think, and those early Hats Off videos, I mean, they're not great technically. The audio levels are all over the place. I was never really thinking about doing this as, it was just a creative outlet, honestly. I was working a 9-to-5 job at the time, and it just became something I wanted to do for fun. And then the numbers started getting big, and I was like, oh, wow, there's something here. As time went on, I kind of learned to hone my voice and my brand. But those original videos they're trying to be way more closer to something like Every Frame a Painting, I would say, where I was going to concentrate specifically on like actors and what they were good at and stuff like that. And then it kind of became more biographical and life to death type pieces.
Look, it's not a bad guy to try to rip off, you know?
No, and at the time,
and then you find your own voice.
I haven't checked it out, but I'm told he's back.
It's really fucking good, by the way. This guy knows how to make a YouTube video.
There's a few people that, like, when I launched Hats Off, I was like, okay, this is the type of work I want to emulate, and he was one of them. And I mean, James's Monster Madness, that was like
absolutely
a huge inspiration.
Yep,
and
love it.
You know, it's interesting that a lot of the guys we grew up watching, their content was so front-facing. Their personality, their face, their reactions were such a huge part of their content. I think there's, like, after that wave died off, it seemed like a lot of people started to not do that. It seems like most people today got more into this essayist thing where they don't show their face. It becomes more about showing clips, and that's honestly a lot harder from a copyright perspective. That stuff's going to get dinged a lot more easily. But it's also, for me, it's given me a chance to like use reactions from the media I'm talking about, finding an actor's reaction in a particular piece of entertainment that I'm talking about, and kind of using that throughout the video, using cutaways and stuff like that.
It's so rewarding when you find a really good one.
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah.
When you're trying to bridge a gap and you're trying to advance the story, and you find some piece of dialogue from the movie you're literally talking about that like slots right in. I don't remember any examples, but like today that happened several times in some of the especially the mini docs. I understand you're not the John Candy channel, but you sort of are. The mini doc, the one that was uploaded like 5 years ago, right? It made me cry to find out the guy was like 43. I remember when he died, when I was a kid. I remember when my dad was affected by it. The part that made me bust up was when you said you perfectly assigned the situation to his life. I mean, that's what makes that such a special video that you made, is that the thesis statement, which has happened, everybody's Uncle Buck.
He never felt like a movie star, but rather more like a next-door neighbor, family friend, or perhaps even a favorite uncle who just so happened to be famous.
That's precisely the appeal of John Candy. Not just because that's true about him, but also like almost everybody, I think, in their personal lives has like maybe like a teacher, like a science teacher, or like a next door neighbor, or an uncle, or like somebody in their life. They're like, this guy is like the funniest person I know.
Or someone that makes mac and cheese and a chef's hat. There's something there in John Candy's work that always resonated with me as a kid. And I always just loved it, even like his crappier movies. Who's Harry Crumb's not great, but you always found things to enjoy about them. There's a few topics and movies that I did very early in the channel's history where I'm like, I wish I just waited until I got a little bit better at crafting these videos. But the John Candy one is one, even though that came like in that first half dozen or so, I'm still pretty proud of it because the thesis came across.
He was just everybody's Uncle Buck.
I mean, that's ultimately, I think, what elevates. Like, so, you can do a really strong retrospective. You can teach everybody about this actor if maybe they weren't familiar. That's a lot. That's the mantle you've picked up. Is let's take Doug Walker for example. I found out today that Doug Walker has made 715 Nostalgia Critic episodes. Holy fuck! I hear from younger people, like younger than you, that a lot of. They haven't seen the majority of movies that he reviewed, but they feel as though they have, like it's through him. I don't know how to feel about that. Like, I think it's probably a really positive thing because it keeps the memory and the general film knowledge and cultural knowledge in the air. Like he serves that purpose, but you didn't watch the movie, if you watched Doug clown on it. And so, I think one of the things that a retrospective can do, or like a life to death kind of thing, is more like, hey, let me interest you in checking these out as opposed to tearing it down or something.
Frank Castle is dead. Call me the Punisher.
Please. I'll sub to your channel if you sub to mine.
I was one of those people, like, I think it was like Tuesday night on Channel Awesome, where it was like watching a Nostalgia Critic episode was like appointment television. It was
fascinating.
It was part of this new thing where it was, and I don't know if you guys really remember, I was thinking about this, but like early YouTube in like 2006, 2007, like it wasn't a cool place.
I was viral on it.
Yeah. And like, I remember like the front page, there was this like, one of the most popular videos was the series, I think it was called Chad Vader.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And that guy still does Darth Vader's voice for Lucasfilm, by the way.
Come with me. More will be here soon.
It was kind of the Wild West, and it was to see all the... I remember being like, when YouTube started to do like, well, we're going to have different types of accounts. You can have a director's account, or I forget what but I remember having a director account, and I was like, wow, look at me. I can upload videos longer than 10 minutes, and it was just to be there and see how it evolved. And I remember they even experimented once with like video replies. So many things you saw come and go, and not only that, creators you saw come and go. I mean, the majority of people, excluding people like Doug and James that I grew up watching, like they don't do it anymore.
Yep.
Right.
You
Yep.
know,
And you would DM with people on there too. This is before Google One.
there was a
Google...
messaging system, yeah.
And I always tell the story that James Gunn DM'd me because everybody was telling him that he ripped off my movie. Because he had made a half man, half ape movie. I had made a half man, half ape movie. And he was like, just so you know, like, I don't know anything about it. I understand it was at Trauma Dance, but I don't. And I was like, it's okay. I'm just a really big fan. Want to watch it? And he was like, not really. I would rather keep the plausible deniability.
The first and only born half man, half ape. Abo, the Humonkey.
It's funny too when you look at it, because like the biggest YouTubers in that era, what do you think they had sub-wise? It like 25,000 subs? I mean, it certainly wasn't like... No. I remember the first video to hit 1 million, I think, was the evolution of dance. That was like a big deal. It was like, oh my God, 1 million.
My major point of reference is I uploaded sometime in 2006, Lord of the Rings by George Lucas, which had been made like in 2002 or something, like 4 years prior. And I just threw it up there just for the heck of it. And it was on the front page.
And we should clarify, the front page was not any algorithm. It was just YouTube editors picking stuff they found entertaining.
Yeah. And at one time, it was the 50th most viewed video on YouTube of all time. And it only had something like 1.2 mil, or it was something like that.
But there was a time when that was like
whoa,
crazy numbers to see on YouTube.
Yeah, like they didn't even know how to manage like email notifications about that. Like they didn't like throttle it. So I remember I remember I went to work. I was working as a help desk student. And I opened my email. I opened the front page of YouTube and I was on it. And I was like, oh, I must be logged in or something. But I was just there. And then, my email crashed with,
wow,
thousands and thousands.
Yeah, it just had to be notification. I
was like, something's happened.
And he said, I need you to play Legolas in Lord of the Rings. And I said, okay, George, that's who you want.
You were making, you mentioned you were making films with friends. When did you decide at an early age, I want to become a filmmaker? And where did YouTube even fit into that? Was that part of the picture, or were you a film fan that wanted to make traditional commercial theatrical movies?
Yeah, I mean, I think any of us that get involved in film at a young age, that's certainly the dream.
I don't know that it is anymore, is the thing.
I don't think it is.
No.
But I think then, at the age which would have been like the early 2000s, when I really started to develop an interest in this, I remember a friend of mine, we were going to like make a little short. We were going to make something, and I remember there was this question of like, well, how can we get people to see it? Like, the thought was, we'll try to get it on DVD, and then we'll bring it to school with us and show it to the class. Like, I mean, there was just nothing where you can share a video. And I remember just one of the internet forums for some movie discussion I was a part of had linked a YouTube video. And that was kind of like where I was like, oh, wait, you can, this is new. And it's funny, I remember the first time I ever really started experimenting with that was there was this great video game called The Movies, where it was basically like The Sims, but you ran your own little movie studio. And it was great. And part of the game built in was this, you could make your little movies and share them online.
Oh, cool.
And even for like a 3-minute video, like it took hours to export and process and all that stuff. But it was such a cool little experiment because there was a community, and there was even like, I remember like, and their servers have long been shut down, but you could like hire actors. Like people would advertise, oh, I'll do a voice in your little, and it was, you know, it was all kind of not great stuff. You were limited in terms of just options you could have these avatars do. But that was kind of the first thing of like, all right, there's something happening here where you can showcase your work.
The fact of the matter was you were able to make and showcase stuff, no matter how, you know, minimal it may be.
Right.
Yeah, because before that, it was like basically Newgrounds, but you had to kind of be good at Flash to put stuff up there.
Yeah.
And I remember because, you know, E3 was coming around and I think they were showcasing like the new GameCube. And I was like, I need to see footage of like Rogue Leader in action, and it took me like all day to download like a postage stamp video of Rogue Leader. It took forever. So when YouTube came around, it was like it was so easy. It was amazing.
Again, today we think of it as just this thing that most people visit daily, but back in 2006, it was such this interesting little tool, and it was so, again, the majority of it was just these little creators that were doing these almost like, you ever see Be Kind Rewind?
Of course, yeah.
Doing little things like that. And there was such a charm to it. And that's why when you look back at all those guys like James and who really struck big early on, it was just like such a lightning in a bottle situation.
That's an excellent point, is, you know, because we talked about the way he pioneered, but it's like, you know, I remember being in college and seeing YouTube for the first time. And I at first blush, I just thought YouTube was another E-Bombs world. I just thought it was, you know, another way of many that you could watch small videos. And for a little while it was. It really wasn't until Google bought it that it became like the standard. Like I think I didn't realize the internet was looking for like a place to put all video, like a clearinghouse. It wasn't until I saw, my first episode was the TMNT one, that I was like, okay, it's got that kind of crappy, scrappy quality, but he is producing a show with a title in his bedroom and he's editing it and he's shooting it. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was all in reach, but it also felt like something you could actually follow and watch week to week. So it's sort of like it occupied this like intermediate space that hadn't been occupied yet. But now, of course, is, you know, makes up all of YouTube, frankly.
This is just a bunch of cockadookie. This is bullfuck.
It was just so interesting to watch all these guys and girls come up and just, find their own voice and do these little projects and little series where, and you know, me sitting there as a teen, like, oh, it's maybe you don't have to go this route that I've always been told you had to go in filmmaking.
I remember when Wikipedia launched, which I don't know when that would have been. Let's say like 2003 or something like that. It feels like it would have been around that time. And I remember the way it was sold to me was you can look things up in the encyclopedia that would never be in a real encyclopedia. And I was like what? And they're like Sonic the Hedgehog. I was like, oh, so like any topic? Well, and that the kind of the notion of any topic on the internet, like that you can find a depth of information. And again, you know, I think shows like Monster Madness, where it was like, okay, so it's not just like a quick dopamine, quick meme, quick punchline kind of video. It's, I can watch this and get a little bit of like education on something that like I'm interested in, but maybe I don't have a lot of knowledge in just yet.
Well, the thing I learned about those early creators that I've tried to carry with me is that, you know, people are going to engage in your thumbnail. They're going to click on your video. They're going to watch it when it's suggested to them. They're going to come back for the personality. Yes. That's what keeps them coming back. So you can, and with people like James, that was such a big part of it. You weren't just going in for this guy, or you were going in for a very specific person's view on these movies.
I'm going to do something different, something unheard of. I'm not going to see it.
I learned from the best, really. That's the truth. And it was all about, for me, it was like when Nostalgia Critic or when James talked about like a movie that I thought like, wow, like other people know about this movie like that. It was such a joy.
Yeah, you learn so much about James just by the movies he picked, you know, and the same with you. Whenever you're picking a movie and when you're talking about a movie, you learn a lot about you. So it's that's again, that's the sincerity of YouTube that is so, you know, appealing.
The start, I was not trying to, even like those first couple of videos, I include a very like pretentious disclaimer about like, this is not to profit. This is for my head was not there. My head was not, this is going to be something that I can one day profit off of. It was just like a creative exercise. It got big and kept growing, and I'm very fortunate for that because, like I said, I've been involved in the YouTube community and uploading YouTube videos. There are, I'm not going to share them with you, but there are channels out there, precursors to Hats Off, where I'm doing very clearly James or Doug stuff, or, you know, stuff that was just felt like me mimicking their style. And I'm
gotta
going to get angry about reboots. And here's what, I mean, excluding Monster Madness, one of James's most important videos that I ever saw was the chronologically confused about sequel titles.
I loved it so much.
Why can't it be Rocky 6? Rocky Balboa sounds like it's the first one, but just adding his last name. And what if they made another one? Would they include his middle initial and then his date of birth? But what a shitload of fuck.
It was just like, I had never seen anything like that. It was hitting so many points about stuff that I agreed with. And it's just the way it was shot. Every audio bit had a visual that went perfectly along with it.
And there's nothing, we've talked about this before. We think this is probably the reason that people like the Short Shorts video so much. There's something extremely satisfying about somebody else voicing an opinion you didn't know you already had. That had been living in the subconscious
100%.
for a while.
Yeah.
And then somebody kind of like articulates it in a way that you feel like represents you appropriately or at the appropriate level.
You might not have known it, but your brain did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I said when I was going through your videos, I was trying to sometimes see things through your eyes. You do a retrospective on Gene Wilder, right? And it's like, you could kick that video off a lot of different ways. And the decision to do Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, I think is like, that's a creative decision. That's like, well, this is my starting place. But in reality, it's a really good starting place for Gene Wilder, the actor and the
it's how most of us discovered him as kids, being introduced to that movie, and that was the first one I ever did. There was Gene Wilder, How to React Naturally. Again, it was way more similar to what Every Frame of Painting was doing, which is this very specific entertainer, specific filmmaker targeting a very unique thing that they do. Not talking about their career as a whole, just this little unique thing that they bring to their films. And I had that Gene Wilder thing written for years. It was kind of, I think it was a film school piece that we had to do something, or a performer we respect. So the kernel was there, and it was like every so often I went back to it, and logistically it was a real pain in the ass to figure out, like, well, how do I source these clips, and so it was something that, like, even when you listen to it now, a couple of my recording sessions, the room tone is completely different because I would record like little snippets of that in different apartments I was living in. Like it was just something I would work on little by little. Me and some of my friends have been doing sketch comedy videos and, stuff we were pouring our hearts and souls into and our finances. And we were having a blast doing it. Don't get me wrong. It was some of the most creatively fulfilling and fun work, but just to work at something so hard and get, like, even when you really promote it and push and try, you're getting like 250 views. Oh, yeah. It was just like, what are we doing? Like, why? Stuff wasn't landing. And we had just done a really long, intensive project that required us to hire actors for the first time and coordinate schedules. And it was just a lot. And while the views were good and we were proud of it creatively, it didn't almost justify its existence.
It's a hard pill to swallow. I think a lot of people can relate to what you just said, which is like the thing you work the very, very hardest on, the thing that you stay up all night working on, like very well may not be the thing that is successful at all.
Yeah,
and the thing you slap on a pair of short shorts and just blab with your friend, like, may be what follows you. So what happened was I was like, you know what, after that, I'm done. I don't want to work with human beings ever again. I'm so burnt out and exhausted. I'm going to finish this Gene Wilder video. I'm going to do it. And I did it, and I put it out there. And I think originally what I was doing was I was sharing the video in Facebook groups about like classic movie lovers, or I was finding all these like Facebook groups that detail with like 80s nostalgia, and I wasn't trying to sell it. I would just post it and be like, hey, here's who I am. I really respect Jim Wilder. I love the work he's done. I think you'll like this too. Here's a piece I did. I hope you enjoy it. And I just did a couple of them like that. And then it's just something picked up, and it got decent views and like over 1,000, which at that point for me, I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. And I want to say that was like a week before March 13th, 2020, when the world completely changed in terms of how we were doing. And so I found myself working from home with more time on my hands. And then I would just be like, an idea would come to be like, oh, that'd be a fun idea to explore. I'm going to talk about Shemp from the Three Stooges, or I'm going to talk about Jim Varney. And it was like each time I did it, like I would always think like, this is the one that no one's going to see. No one is going to care about Shemp. And it would just, each one would get a little bit. I still don't know what it was, but like when you look at your creator YouTube algorithm stuff, you could see like the spikes of your viewership over your channel's history. There's still to this day, I don't think I've topped it. There was a spike that happened very early on, and
the only thing I could think that did it was Elon Musk, who's very popular now, was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he talked about, I believe, buying one of Gene Wilder's former homes. And just, I don't know if people searched Gene Wilder or if there was something that it blew that video up, and therefore all the subsequent ones went up, and that was it.
Elon Musk making everybody rich.
It's Elon Musk and Joe Rogan. It's just
that's crazy. I mean, probably that's it.
My God, I kind of feel like Trump. I should my success I owe to Joe Rogan and Elon Musk.
He's a beautiful genius, and he helped launch a beautiful rocket called Hats Off Entertainment.
I almost feel like if I ever meet Joe Rogan, I think it was like some UFC fight or something where the first time Trump saw him after winning, and he did kind of this like I was like, if I ever meet Joe Rogan, that's what I have to have the same response. Yeah, like there he is. Because and it blew up, and that was almost like the foundation I needed just to kind of. I think that put me over 1,000 subs. That was just like the beginning of like, okay, maybe I should really concentrate on this. And
the story sounds a lot like Mike Stelklasa and Red Letter Media. His whole story was like, well, I was unemployed. It doesn't sound like that's the case in this situation, but you did have time on your hands because of COVID. He had time on his hands because of unemployment.
Yeah.
And he was like, so I just kind of decided to obsess over a Star Trek movie and make a silly video about it, or, an in-depth really what was motivating him was he wanted to make something comprehensive about how much he hated this movie and why. And then he realized how psychotic he sounded, and so he put a silly voice on it and, to try to like soften the impact.
Why make a video review of this movie after it's been out for like 14 years? Well, the truth is, I've got nothing better to do.
The other ironic part about that is Hats Off Entertainment was the name I used when I did like weddings and corporate events. I was doing a lot of that type of stuff.
He was doing that too.
Yeah, and I think I think Red Letter Day. That's how Red Letter Media got the name. They came from. So that was just like I didn't want to put that on Joe Ramone. I was like, that was an account I used to send like proofs to people. Like, here's your wedding. Here's your. What do you think? Like, that's what that account was for. And I just thought like, it'd be not even thinking that like, oh, hats off. Like I'm tipping the hat. Like it's denoting respect. So it all kind of just. It was this really weird thing of like the first time I didn't really try to be a success on YouTube, it took off.
I mean, that's one of the things that I think is so awesome is I imagine that you do not experience like an audience capture problem as much as the average YouTuber. Right? The thing we'll encounter successful YouTubers who talk to us, and I'll say like, like, what do you want to do next? And they'll say like, I don't know. I'm kind of trapped. I'm like, I make one kind of video and my audience won't, if I did this, I'd dump subscribers or whatever. Obviously film analysis is kind of where it would be really weird if you did something besides film analysis, probably on this channel, but I don't see you constrained to like, it's got to be this movie or that. It seems like each upload is Joe deciding like, I think I'd like to do Dennis the Menace.
That's 100% what it is. It's either that or it's like in researching one topic, I kind of discover something. I'm like, oh, I'm going to hold off on that. Mm. And I did a video on the lost version of Three Amigos. Mm. And I got into like, oh, Sam Kinison filmed this scene and that got deleted and never found. I'm like, oh, Sam Kinison, that'd be an interesting topic. So it's always been, there is like a 6 degrees of
always an
connection between my videos. For the most part, sometimes it's totally random. It's whatever comes to me. But yeah, there has been a lot of like natural topic leaping from one another.
It's not as though people don't talk about John Hughes movies. Of course they do. It's, in a way, John Hughes was like the franchise of his era. It's kind of fascinating going through some of your videos and being like, this is what big Hollywood was at one time. Was family movies and romantic comedies. And
I love John Hughes. He's someone I really respect and admire because he's one of the only filmmakers that basically said like, fuck it to the Hollywood experience and just was like, I'm going to do this in my backyard in Chicago. I'm going to film all the stuff here. I don't want to go there. I don't want to have an office there. I want to be around my family and kids. Like he was one of the few people that really pioneered this idea of like, you don't have to be in Hollywood to be the Hollywood filmmaker.
And that was in his era.
Yeah, right. And I think that when he walked away from it all, a big part of it was they were starting to push back against that. And it was becoming more and more about being on backlots, but so many of his movies, the great stuff that we love, none of that stuff was filmed in backlots. I mean, it was all like he would find these like suburban Chicago high schools and elementary schools that had gymnasium space that they weren't using, and he was like, "That's our soundstage. Like, we'll do it there." And That's just so cool that he was able to do that and prove that it can be done independently of a major studio's, backlot filming.
So some of the films you talk about like are very well known. I think Dennis the Menace, Flintstones, that occupies a really big memory for a lot of people that doesn't get a lot of like YouTube film analysis necessarily. Certainly nobody's doing a deep dive on like the John Goodman Flintstones movie. As I was listening to that video, I was like, so I loved that movie when I was a kid. And when I had my own child, I was like, I got to show her this Flintstones movie because it's fucking fun. It took until adulthood when I realized that people don't like it or that John Goodman himself was disappointed or whatever.
I'm the same way. Yeah. I mean, there's so many movies that I grew up idolizing and loving that lo and behold, you get older and you discover like, oh no, people hated this movie.
Oh, that wasn't liked. Yeah. What's the big one? Oh, Ghostbusters 2 is like that too.
Yeah. That's one where it's like, it's really not that bad. It's weird that some of these movies get, and I think a lot of them became, as much as I love those early internet film critics and stuff, a lot of those movies became punching bags for them. And I think that almost like reinforced this negativity around them. And
you seem mad at Siskel and Ebert a little bit.
I love them because they're such a capsule into reviews at the time. And not only that, it's just like, I forget what the exact run of their show was from maybe like late 70s, early 80s to, I know Ebert did it with other hosts until the 2000s, but it's like, it's such a great window into where film criticism was at the time. And it's so rewarding to watch them champion a movie that like everyone else hated. And also it sucks then to watch them dogpile on a movie that's pretty enjoyable. And there have been quite a few times where I've looked up their review on something, I'm like, oh my God, they were glowing about this movie. It's interesting because you would think that no one was championing it back in the day, but they had interesting tastes.
Half the time, Ebert's criticism is like, it was too dark. It didn't have any heart. It came from a bad place. It was malicious. Like a lot of times he's coming from a more philosophical place, I feel like.
You ever want to see one that's a real trip is their review of Home Alone 3, where Ebert gives it a thumbs up.
I saw that just recently.
It's terrific.
Yeah.
Where Siskel is stunned.
Now, this is going to astound you, but I'm giving the movie thumbs up.
It does astound me. Are you okay?
Better than you were the day that you liked Starship Troopers.
Okay. Oh, no.
Yeah, Ebert loves it.
Loves it. Like, not just like, no, it carries on the brand well. Like, I think he says it's better than the other two.
This movie empowers little kids. This is the one where they finally got it right. I liked it better than the other two.
Than the original Home Alone?
What's this new shit where people don't like Home Alone 2? Are you seeing this?
It's the Ghostbuster 2 effect, man.
Home Alone 2 is fantastic.
It is. It takes everything to love about the first one, expands upon it, plus adds in Tim Curry.
Yeah.
And Rob Schneider. You get that great stuff in the plaza and
Donald Trump tells them where the front desk is.
The only thing I don't like is the pigeon lady.
She's a big meme in our household because she decides to be homeless because of a breakup.
Right.
I didn't want to get my heart broken again.
And also, like, I hate when she says to Kevin, she's like, don't make promises you can't keep. It's like, you're talking to a child. Like, why are you getting all high and mighty with this kid?
One wrong move and you might decide to become homeless.
She's like threatening him at one point. It's just a very weird, then like, I don't know. He's just like.
I learned from your video that her name is Annie. So
her name's Annie.
Really?
Yeah. In the script, they reveal her name. So, and I don't, it's just, again, it's the Old Man Marley arc in that first movie is handled so much better.
Yeah, they don't, you're right. But Pigeon Lady is pretty fucking funny. We say it in our house all the time. We say, like, we'll say, like, hey, do you want to go out to dinner? Like, I don't want to get my heart broken again.
I always like Mr. Duncan, too. Toot,
and Mr. Duncan's gonna just take it down to the hospital.
Gather it all up. Yeah, it's just ridiculous that
Kevin doesn't figure it out. First, he trashes the joint. It's a great movie. I love it. And the violence can't be overstated, really. It's very
getting electrocuted and you see a skeleton.
Oh, Joe, wasn't it you who said on Twitter, I don't know if you speculated this or figured it out or what, but it was obvious that the third act was supposed to be in the hotel.
Well, I've studied John Hughes' writings quite a bit, and I've gone through his scripts a lot, and to me, the involvement of the two bumbling plaza, the concierge and the bellhop, like that to me suggests that was like an idea for maybe the original. You guys would know this too. I think there's like a video game from Home Alone 2 where it basically takes place. He's like setting traps in the plaza.
And they probably developed it during the early script.
I would imagine that there's probably some, and it was a studio was like, no, for marketing reasons, we gotta have that poster with Harry and Marv on either side of the Empire State Building. Like that's what we want. And so I don't think John Hughes was probably resistant to it. I think he probably agreed it was for the, and I do think it's a great movie as is. I think including Harry and Marv is a lot of fun, and I don't resent that, but it makes me think.
I bet you, even with Harry and Marv, they tried to make it work in the hotel. I bet you there was a point in time where they were like, but wouldn't it be great if he could terrorize a whole, and maybe they tried to write it and they were like, well, it doesn't really make sense for Kevin to terrorize the whole hotel with occupants in it.
If I had a guess, I would say maybe there was like an element of what ended up in the movie where it's like maybe one of the floors of the plaza was being renovated and Kevin like stumbled into that area.
Where everybody goes home for Christmas. I don't know. It empties out and Harry and Marv are the only ones left inside the whole hotel. Do you ever get accused of bad takes? Do you ever have to deal with this sort of thing?
All the time, yeah. I mean, the most.
What's your biggest L take?
Yeah, what's your biggest L take? We'll go around the room. No, I have no idea what mine is.
I get a lot that people have an issue with like me calling something an almost cult classic. And I myself, as I even said, I've struggled with the distinction is there. And I think the thing that I've come up with in my own head is that like, is this a movie that gets midnight screenings? Is this a movie that has merchandise around it, T-shirts and hats and that type of thing? Not
criteria.
Redbubble and Etsy type stuff. Is it something that there's actual merchandise for? And if it doesn't play at midnight, would it play well to a sold out crowd at a midnight screening? That's kind of been where I've chosen but again, everyone has a different idea of what a cult classic is. So,
well, so their contention is what? That like, oh no,
this is a cult classic.
It is in fact a cult classic. Yeah, okay.
But it's, I guess, like semantics. There's so much. We all have different relationships with the movies we grew up with, and
this is probably a problem with the just branding a show in the first place. One of your shows being like, it's not that bad. And then you go on to maybe even like, it seems like you downright like the movie,
Oh, there've been plenty of times too where I'm like, yeah, no, I'll revisit this movie for an episode, and then like I'm like, oh no, it is bad. I'm not gonna back away from this.
It is bad.
Yeah,
that Flintstones, man. I was like, Rick Moranis and John Goodman, this fucking rocks.
Yeah,
and literally and figuratively.
And doesn't Dale Cooper? He's the villain, isn't that Kyle MacLachlan?
Yeah, from Twin Peaks. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, he is.
One of the
a very hot Halle Berry.
Oh yeah,
yeah, she was. You think like that was supposed to be Sharon Stone, but she didn't want to do it. So I think Halle Berry's great. I think she worked out better.
Yeah, Sharon Stone would play well in the poster.
It's for me that the really interesting thing about that video and making it was like finding out that John Goodman did not want anything to do with that movie. Like it was like actually having panic attacks over accepting that role because he knew it would. He thought it would become like the end of his career. It was Spielberg who was like, you're going to do this.
That was during a time where Spielberg, like, he was, much like John Hughes, he was kind of like a blockbuster maker. And it's interesting, like obviously he's elderly now, but he's still a very active filmmaker. But at some point in his career, he kind of stepped away from, I'm just going to put like cool old franchises into production and try to, make things work. Like he just kind of stepped completely into like the awards show circuit, and that's kind of what he does now. Yeah.
But he was, through Amblin, there's so much great entertaining stuff that he did as a producer. And that Flintstones movie, you could say a lot of things about it in terms of like, but as someone that grew up with that movie, like I never had problems with the story. I never thought it was too, if anything, I liked how adult it was. It treated the characters very adult. It had a very adult story. It just so happened that it starred the Flintstones.
And that director, we've talked about it on this show. His name is Brian Levant.
Yeah,
you mentioned him in the video. And I was thinking about Flintstones, Jingle All the Way, Beethoven. Those are three movies that are like pretty fucking solid for families, and they have batshit third acts. All three of them have third acts that just become really, really insane. And you can tell like the dude doesn't really always know how to end his movies, but he's like, I'm just gonna end it big one way or another.
He seems like I've watched a lot of interviews with him. He seems like a great guy, but he has, I think more recently he kind of fell into like the direct-to-video sequel machine. The Christmas Story 2, the direct-to-video one he did. Yeah. And there was like a few like Scooby-Doo direct-to-video live-action things.
The Curse of the Lake Monster.
I just saw your Christmas Vacation 2 video, and it's one of those things where my family is obsessed with Christmas Vacation. Like my dad like quotes it. It's like half his vocabulary. And I remember being in like a DVD rental store one day and seeing Christmas Vacation 2 on the shelf. I'm like, what the fuck is this? It's being like, it came out of nowhere. And
They just
actually
kinda snuck it out there.
Actually, watching your video is the first time I've seen any footage from it, and it looks awful.
One of those things where you're like, maybe there's something good there. It's just nothing. There's just nothing there. It's such a fundamental misunderstanding of that whole concept.
Yeah, and just like the whole like journey of National Lampoons was very interesting too. Just because, yeah, it used to be like, oh, that's the good funny movies, and then it became just trash.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at this point, it's been more trash than quality.
Yeah, exactly.
At a certain point, it's
like The Simpsons. It's like there's
more bad seasons than good ones.
The first video I saw of yours where I really felt like connected to you as a creator was the Holdovers video. And yeah, when I stumbled on that movie last year, I was like, how did nobody tell? Like, this takes place like literally where I work. Like the whole scene in Boston. That's right. That's literally where I like go to work.
And it's I got very fortunate. That was something I got to see at the Philadelphia Film Festival a few months before it had its campaign, and I was really preaching about it then before it came. Like when I got a wide release, I was telling people it's great, and yeah, I've discussed it a lot of times on the channel when I talk about Christmas movies, where it's like, when was the last good one? Would you say Elf? I mean, as far as like not even good, but like an iconic kind of
where it had staying power and people watch it all the time. It's been a while. Probably.
And I liked 8-Bit Christmas, but nobody talks about that.
I think it's super good, honestly. Like 8-Bit Christmas is strong, but it got queefed out on HBO Max, so it's not a real movie. And I don't know if you saw me talking about there was this movie, the Best Christmas Pageant Ever, and it played very well for my 7-year-old. Once you have a 7-year-old, like you do start like reassessing movies through their eyes. Like, is this working? I don't know about you, EJ. Like, very frequently, when we watch movies as a family, really how I'm testing the movie is like seeing it through her eyes and seeing if like any of this is working,
And I've said that in a few of my videos too, where I'm like, if you have kids, I think this is a good movie to show them.
Yeah.
And even some of the darker stuff. I mean, as a kid, I don't know about you guys, but I really appreciated when a movie was almost like a little sinister and a little dark and just like, it made me feel more grown up.
Christopher Lloyd and Dennis the Menace is one of those like line crossing, like we may have made a weird decision here creatively, but I you know what, man? Like, it stuck with me. I remember, side tangent, I saw that movie in theaters when it came out, and I really liked it. I liked the animated show, the Phil Hartman animated show. I watched that like all, because that came out in '86. I was born in '86, and so it was on repeats on WLVI 56 in Boston. Plus, the Dennis the Menace kid actor they got was really strong in that movie.
Mason Gamble. Yeah.
Leah Thompson, she's very hot in the movie. And
Mrs. Wilson just died, by the way. Joan Plowright.
I saw that. Yeah, last
95,
week.
Yeah,
what a good actress.
Yeah, she was great. Perfect Mrs. Wilson. That's another thing too about that movie is there's that scene where like the Wilsons kind of talk about that they can never have kids. It's like it's just like not the stuff that you would expect to see in an adaptation of a comic strip. Like really humanizing those characters.
John Hughes knows how to make a fucking movie, man, or how to write a movie. I went to the theater this was an unusual thing where we would go to the theater with my family and my friend's family. So normally he would either come with us or whatever, but like both our families were there. His mom had just had a divorce. My parents are still together to this day, so we're like intact. His mom had just had this divorce, and I think she was like either drunk or like traumatized or something. And I remember she was like really acting out in the middle of the theater at Christopher Lloyd's appearance. She kept like recoiling. She was like, ew. And she was like being bombastic. Every time I see him, I think of like my friend's mom.
I mean, in her defense, it is a grotesque portrayal of a human being. It was like, probably written as like they in the makeup and the way that character looks, they were just like, let's just make him look like
very menacing.
The worst like possible person you could imagine being around children.
My favorite moment in that movie, again, this is something I say all the time, is when Buzz, I don't know the actor's name. What's his name? Yeah,
Devin Rattray.
Right. He plays like the boyfriend of the babysitter.
The hunky boyfriend, by the way. He went from being Buzz as like the butthead brother to like by this time he's kind of being like a little bit more of a hunk.
Yeah, he was kind of like, that's right. He had like dropped a few pounds and And so he was having to read to Dennis, and he was reading, I think, Thomas the Tank Engine while Dennis is in the bath, and he's basically illiterate. And so there's like a line of dialogue, and he's supposed to read "sobbed Huffy," and just the line delivery is so fucking funny. This guy's such a great actor.
Sabed Huffy.
Oh yeah, I mean he was in that awful Home Alone Disney reboot.
All right.
They
Yeah,
did.
he plays a cop, and he is Buzz, right?
And he's Buzz, yeah.
Yeah, that cast that orbited John Hughes was so special. SCTV was a big piece of that.
He had a drawing power, and I think a lot of people wanted to work with him for that reason. And I'm fascinated by like late era, right before like retirement, John Hughes, which was like basically anything following Home Alone. Like Home Alone completely changed the course of his career. It just became about like, let's make these movies with kids fighting bumbling adults. And it was Baby's Day Out, Dutch, Dennis the Menace. So many of them were just like, they just starred kids, and they all had like a very similar theme. And it's interesting because I always think like, would John Hughes have come out of retirement, like with stuff like streaming? And apparently from what I've heard, I think it was his granddaughter had come to him and said like her classmates found it cool that her grandpa directed Ferris Bueller, and that had kind of kickstarted something in him again, that he was considering coming back, but never did. And
well, what's the deal? He retired directing in 91, but he continued writing for a little while?
I would like to think he retired because he had to work with Jim Belushi, which I think would force anyone to retire from filmmaking.
Is Jim Belushi a big asshole? I don't know.
That's one of the Hollywood rumor, you could say. But
I mean, we all know Chevy Chase. But I didn't know about. Somehow I missed the Jim Belushi one.
Yeah, no, I think really it honestly came down to he just wasn't being allowed to make movies the way he wanted to do them anymore. And apparently, it was never publicized, but John Candy's death really affected him. He felt that John Candy had been like worked to death, and Hollywood had gotten really greedy with the way they were forcing him in movies. And when I made my John Hughes video, I basically said I think he took Ferris Bueller's advice with the life moves pretty fast, and he just dropped out of everything.
And he died young as well.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that almost adds this mysticism to his work. The fact that he disappeared. I mean, the fact that he just walked away at the height of his fame, and not only that, then he just died young before like. In 2009, so it was before like there was really this need for like retrospectives on movies, and he did one audio commentary on Ferris Bueller, and it's great. Yeah, I mean, so I think he would have gotten more involved and probably maybe written books about his movies and stuff like that.
Tell us about the Uncle Buck Blu-ray.
Oh yeah, that was kind of a reason why I wanted to come on at this time to talk my wares. I became friends with a few people who have done commentaries for Kino Lorber Blu-ray, who they're fantastic. Even before I did work for them, they're one of the only Blu-ray companies that puts out the big iconic movies, but then also like stuff like The Sting 2 that no one is really giving thought to preserving and making a release of. And I reached out through one of my friends who's worked for them in the past and just said like, hey, here's some of the work I've done on Uncle Buck. I love this movie. I grew up with it. I would love to perhaps do an audio commentary. And they said, yeah, come and do it. And it was a really fun experience to dive even deeper into my research on that movie.
You didn't go in cold.
No, I mean, I definitely had a foundation to go on, but there was so much stuff to do. Actually, I tracked down one of the movies used to give like publicity packets during like junket interviews to the reporters, and it kind of just list information you wouldn't know otherwise. And that in turn led to me getting the audio commentary gig on Summer Rental, another John Candy movie. And that time I actually spoke to the co-writer. So it was like getting even more in-depth detail. And yeah, it was both of them were just so much fun. I mean, it's weird to talk through a movie by yourself. The Uncle Buck was my first one. I think I've kind of gotten a little bit better at it as I've done a couple of them now, but yeah, I'm really proud of it. It comes out, I think, February 18th. It's available for pre-order now. It's going to be 4K. It looks great.
Yeah, is it a nice new transfer? Is that
it's a nice new transfer. That's honestly, I recorded this commentary a long time ago. It just took them a while to get the print from Universal. And I believe they've recorded a new interview with Tia's actress, Jean Louise Kelly. So there's just, there's going to be some great stuff on that Blu-ray. Great. And I think it's one of John Candy's best roles. I know Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is which is, again, another great movie, but Uncle Buck really feels so unique to him and his brand.
Yeah, every time I watch a John Candy movie, I walk away from it going like, man, he's got something that nobody else has. And you said that in the documentary. The best way to describe it is like truth. There's like
Yeah.
a truth behind this guy.
Yeah, I'm really excited. People keep asking me as if like I'm involved with this Ryan Reynolds, Colin Hanks documentary. I'm like, I have no idea like what's going on with it. As much as I might like to be involved, I have no idea. But I'm told they're working on it. And also, Paul Myers, who is Mike Myers' brother, he's a great film journalist. He wrote a great book on The Kids in the Hall. He's written a really in-depth John Candy biography, a print biography, which will be out in October. So I think next year or this year and the following year are going to be big John Candy kind of resurgence. I think between the documentary on Amazon Prime and this book, I think you're going to see a lot more of John Candy.
You often hear how tired people are of cynicism and of sarcasm and of being uninvested. And if ever there was an actor that, I think like Robin Williams maybe would be another one. You could probably name like 10 or something where it's like every time you see this person in a movie, it really grabs your attention and like kind of sucks the cynicism out of you, even if you're like filled with it,
Yeah. I mean, I'm on a mission to cover on my channel every single one of them. In one of my vast series now that I do, I'm going to talk about every single John Candy movie. So it's just been great to dive in and find those roles that I think with him, we all know Uncle Buck. We know Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Summer Rental, The Great Outdoors. But for like every one of those movies, there's like 5 that he did that were just like no one talked about, no one saw. There's this movie that it was essentially supposed to be Cannonball Run 3. It's called Speed Zone in '89 that he starred in. Like no one talks about that. Like there's so many little projects he did. And because I just think that he liked working and didn't want to say no to people. And
yeah, that's probably exactly what it was, right?
He turned down Ghostbusters, the Louis Tully role, and I think he always regretted that. I think that's why he ends up doing nothing but trouble for Dan Aykroyd. I think there was a little bit of regret that he didn't get to, because that movie was huge.
You peeled the correct banana there.
You highlighted how he cared what people thought of him. He cared how he was received. He cared about how the movies were received.
Is it kind of like a guy who goes 4 for 4, but his team loses?
That happens. Yeah, that you feel terrible about it because you really want the movie to succeed. You don't take them just. I'll get paid for it, and that's great. I don't care about the rest of it. As long as I look good in it, that's ridiculous.
It's a shame he doesn't know his own legacy because his legacy really has stood the test of time.
Yeah, well, when he died, he was at such a weird place in his career because his last few movies had done really poorly, and Cool Runnings was kind of like a big triumphant return for him, and just right after that he ends up dying. So I think that, and everyone says it that he would have done a dramatic career, and you can see those pieces for sure.
Yeah, it's like the Robin Williams turn. He never got to really fully complete that.
Yeah.
Right. All right, I got to ask since we've talked about 2 big guy Johns, are you a John Pinette fan at all?
Funny story. So yeah, actually, I like John Pinette a lot. He used to,
very funny.
For some reason, I don't know how he ended up in the Philadelphia area, but he was living in this area when he passed away. I know he was on the road, I believe, performing when he died, but he used to come into a restaurant I worked in college. That was just a lovely guy.
Wow. He seemed like the nicest guy in the world.
Oh, he was one of those people that I've heard your stories. You've worked in restaurants. He was one of those guys where like the servers would fight over who would get the table because he was such a generous tipper. And I really think that we have the funny fat guy is gone.
Yeah, I was trying to think, even though we were talking, I'm like, who would be like the guy? I'd be like, oh, I'm so glad this person is in here. And I can't think of many.
I give a lot of shit to Josh Gad. It's kind of become a pilgrimage I'm on because I just think the man's involved in too much. And
he's like the anti-John Candy.
I really picked some fights with Josh Gad and things I've said, but he to me comes across like a wannabe funny fat guy without the charm.
Josh, no.
Yes.
I'm a wannabe fat guy.
Even like Jack Black, who's just completely
he's over.
He's an impersonation of himself, right? So that authenticity thing that we're so attracted to is not there.
Yeah,
no.
I watched. I don't know if you guys saw, but that movie he released over the holidays, the Dear Santa. Yeah.
Oh no,
it was just like
that was shitty. Yeah, I didn't see it.
I wonder how the Minecraft movie is gonna do. I feel like I don't think anybody's gonna be going for that one.
He's just found this really weird place he's in his career right now where it's like the bearded. I'm not a fan of this bearded,
the homeless.
There's something.
The Dan Olsen.
Something funny happened where all of a sudden he's not the Jack Black we all knew.
Well, I mean, obviously he's in poor health. So like I do struggle. sometimes people will watch our content, they'll see John, right? And I think the fact that he's in poor health, people like struggle with that. I feel a little bit that when I watch Jack Black, I'm like, I kind of need to see you get a bit healthier, and then like I can like enjoy the joke again.
Yeah. I've seen like a few concert clips where he's just like flush and does not look
like people die, you know.
Yeah.
It's a little bit serious.
I think he did pretty good as Bowser. I think he kind of embodied a monstrous role. But when he's just hopping around being Jack Black, I'm like, please stop.
And Jim Varney, Leslie Nielsen, these are towards the top of your list. We didn't even really touch upon them, but
yeah. The Jim Varney video was, up until that point in time, was probably the biggest release that I had. Like the other ones were doing pretty well, but like
interesting.
That was like, I think at the time I was like $75K out the gate, and that was a huge deal for me. And I think a big part of that was, again, talking about like some of the early internet film. Like the Ernest movies were a very easy punching bag. But look at this dog shit movie where this guy is just like mugging for the camera, and the stories are not great. And I don't think people really knew like the man behind that, and knew that there was this serious like guy that wanted to be a character actor that just could not break free of that character.
Know what I mean, Var?
It's a hell of a performance. I love the performance.
It's a great performance. And in those movies, he got to do a lot of like little character parts as Ernest's alter ego.
We talked about Jaleel White recently. That's somewhat similar, where it's like, this is a hell of a performance.
Yeah, it's and it was that same thing where it's like he wanted to be a dramatic actor, and every time he got close, like Ernest kind of kept him down, and then he died before he could really see what his legacy would become in that role, which is, and that's been great to see so many people kind of become proud of their love of Ernest. And I think that's another one. There's a documentary apparently in the works on him as well.
Oh, that'd be great. People would watch that.
Those Ernest movies were everywhere as a kid. Like,
yes.
Like my cousin would have one, like a random one
on tape, on TV.
He was just everywhere. Like,
I still remember going into Blockbuster and like being wowed at the amount, because they would all be next to each other. And then I remember at the very end would be The Importance of Being Earnest was the actual, that's how I knew the section was over. I'd be like, all right, that's somewhere. But that was the type of memories that I really wanted to reflect in my work, was when you would walk into a video store as a kid and discover movies that way. I still remember there was I don't know if you had them where you were at, it was called Movies Unlimited. It was a chain, and I think it was an interesting place because you could either rent or buy the tapes that they had. And I remember when I was a kid walking in there, and they had like every Abbott and Costello movie, which there's like
awesome.
And it's just to see them like all laid out like that was an experience that there was no other way to find
at that time, the idea of like big selection in a physical store, it only goes so far, and they had to prioritize what would get rented frequently. So the idea of an obscure movie was just a much bigger deal. And or I remember like I got it in my head in high school. I want to watch all the Friday the 13th movies, and just finding all of them was extremely difficult.
Yeah, because one Blockbuster would have 1, 4, and 6, and then the other would have 2. It was like you had that's what I think today too. It's like I remember as a kid trying to track down all the Three Stooges shorts. I had a book of all their filmography, and like I would go through like, wow, that one. It was like, kind of collecting Pokemon cards for me. It was like I wanted them all. But like the stupid VHS tapes would have them out of order, just like 3 random ones. And if that kid in me today could see that I could have them all at the click of my Apple TV,
like
it really would.
Are you a physical media collector to this day?
Absolutely, yeah.
So Blu-ray, do you do any of the hipster shit like we do, like Laserdisc, VHS?
I was way more into VHS up until when I moved and lost some room. They're just...
They do take
I have them. They're in storage. If ever I'm at a place where I can... Yeah, I love them. And I think they will... you guys, I think, are on the cusp of... Because I think I know right now they are. There are some that are really going up in value, but I think they're going to keep driving nostalgic and...
I think so too. I just keep seeing them emerge. I 2 years ago, I thought like, oh, I'll talk about a VHS or two, and now I see it everywhere.
Let's rock!
I just keep seeing them emerge.
Coming out the goddamn wall!
Subscribe to Red Cow Entertainment on Patreon for full episodes every other week.